The Horus heresy is the single worst thing that ever happened to humanity. The Emperor's favorite son turned traitor. Half the Space Marine legions fell to chaos. Terra itself burned. 10,000 years later, the Imperium is still bleeding from wounds inflicted during those 7 years of civil war. But here's the question everybody thinks about. What if it didn't have to happen? What if the Emperor could have actually saved Horus? See, the heresy wasn't inevitable. It required specific failures, specific moments where things could have gone differently. The Emperor, for all his power and supposed wisdom, made catastrophic mistakes with his sons. And even after corruption took hold, there were theoretical points where intervention might have worked. So let's explore two scenarios. First, what if the Emperor prevented the corruption from ever happening? Second, what if he somehow managed to save Horus and the others even after chaos got its claws in? Both scenarios completely reshaped the 41st millennium. Both revealed just how much humanity lost. And both show that even in the best case scenario, the galaxy is still a nightmare. Because this is Warhammer 40K, and happy endings don't exist here. Scenario 1. Prevention. The Emperor actually pays attention. Let's start with the obvious problem. Saving just Horus is not the only problem. There were many problems along the way. The Emperor was a terrible father. Not in the forgot your birthday way, in the created 20 demigod sons, though we don't talk about 2 of them. This already tells you how fucked up all this was from the start. He managed to lose them and have them scattered across the galaxy, then treated them like tools instead of people. The Primarchs weren't just generals, they were beings designed to be superior to humanity in every way, each with their own personality, dreams, and need for validation from their creator. The Emperor ignored all of that. Here's what should have happened. When the Emperor found Lorgar on Colchis around M30, he should have seen the warning signs immediately. Lorgar worshipped him as a god. The entire planet did. Instead of publicly humiliating Lorgar decades later by destroying Monarchia and forcing the word-bearers to kneel in the ashes, the Emperor could have had an actual conversation. Explain why being worshipped was a problem, not through destruction and shame, but through honest discussion between father and son. Would Lorgar have listened? Maybe, maybe not. But here's the thing. The Emperor's method guaranteed Lorgar would turn. You don't psychologically destroy someone who loves you and expect loyalty. You get resentment, you get someone vulnerable to gods who actually want his worship. Chaos saw Lorgar's pain and offered validation the Emperor refused to give. That could have been prevented. It is 101 psychology. Then there's Angron. When the Emperor found him on New Syria, Angron was leading a slave rebellion. His gladiator brothers and sisters were fighting and dying for freedom. The Emperor could have saved them. He had the power. Instead, he teleported Angron away and let them die. Then he left Angron with the butcher's nails, rage-inducing brain implants, in Angron's skull and expected him to function as a military commander. Those nails were killing Angron slowly, constant pain, eroding personality, reducing him to pure aggression. The Emperor knew this. He could have tried removing them. Yes, I know he actually looked into it and decided it was too risky, but he could have found a way. Instead, he acted like Angron should be grateful for being abducted while his family was slaughtered. When Horus offered Angron a chance at revenge during the heresy, of course he took it. The Emperor had given him nothing but orders and judgment. Angron was eventually going to rebel even if he was alone in this. He must have hated the Emperor already. The Emperor could have found a better path for Angron. If Warhammer was a choice-based game, then the Emperor chose willingly the bad ending. Magnus presents a different problem. The Emperor told Magnus not to use sorcery, then never explained why. Magnus was trying to warn the Emperor about Horus's betrayal when he accidentally shattered the Human Webway project. The Emperor's response? Send Leman Russ to bring Magnus back to Terra, but the order got twisted. Russ destroyed Prospero, murdered thousands of sons, and forced Magnus into Chaos's arms. But here's what could have happened. The Emperor could have actually included Magnus in the Webway project, explain the dangers of the warp, show him why certain sorceries were forbidden, make him part of the solution instead of treating him like a child who couldn't be trusted. Magnus was loyal until the moment his entire legion was being slaughtered. That was preventable. Perturabo never got recognition for his accomplishments. The Iron Warriors did the brutal siege work nobody wanted while other legions got glory. Perturabo asked to build, to create, to be more than a destroyer. The Emperor never listened. When the heresy came, Perturabo sided with Horus partly because he was tired of being ignored. Recognition costs nothing. The Emperor could have given it. Konrad Kurz had visions of his own death and the Emperor's failure. Those visions drove him insane, turned his Night Lords into terror troops who committed atrocities. The Emperor could have helped him process those visions, could have shown him how to bear the burden of foresight. He could have explained those were possible futures, not certain to happen. Instead, he acted like Kurz's madness was a personal failing. Another preventable corruption. Mortarion hated Psychers because his adoptive father on Barbarus was a psychic tyrant who tortured him. The Emperor used psychic powers, reminded Mortarion of that trauma, but never acknowledged it. Never tried to show Mortarion that psychic power wasn't inherently evil. When Nurgle offered Mortarion escape from despair during a plague outbreak, he took it. The Emperor could have built trust first. Damn, I guess most cases just fall down to being a better father. Fulgrim's corruption was more complicated. The Lair blade on Lairin contained a demon that slowly possessed him over months. But here's the thing. Fulgrim only kept that blade because he was obsessed with perfection, and the Emperor encouraged that obsession. The Emperor could have taught the Primarchs about chaos threats explicitly. He could have told him about excess in anything leads to corruption. Told him demons exist. Possession is real. Never touch weird alien artifacts. Instead, he kept all of them ignorant and expected them to avoid dangers they didn't know existed. This all leads to the big guy, Horus. Horus, the War Master, the favorite son. The Emperor gave him command of the Great Crusade, then left to work on the secret Webway project without explaining anything. Then Erebus, a Chaos worshipper, manipulated him while he was wounded and vulnerable on Davin. The demon showed him visions of a future where the Emperor was worshipped as a god and the Primarchs were forgotten. The visions were lies, but they worked because Horus already felt discarded. If the Emperor had stayed involved, had explained what he was building and why, maybe he even left the Webway project to Magnus and Malkador and was there for his wounded son. Maybe, just maybe, that would have made Horus feel valued beyond his military usefulness. Maybe those visions wouldn't have landed. Horus turned because he felt betrayed first. So here's scenario 1. The Emperor actually behaves like a father instead of a general. He acknowledges his son's trauma, gives them recognition, explains his plans instead of keeping secrets. He tells them about chaos explicitly, shows them what demons are, how corruption works, why certain practices are forbidden. He treats them like partners in humanity's future rather than tools for conquest. Does this prevent the heresy? Not completely. Chaos is patient. The ruinous powers would still scheme, but without Lorgar spreading chaos worship for decades before the heresy started, without Magnus's desperation making him vulnerable, without Horus feeling abandoned, the conspiracy falls apart. Maybe 1 or 2 Primarchs still fall, but not 9, not half the legions. Without the heresy, the Great Crusade continues. The human Webway project succeeds. Humanity gets safer FTL travel that doesn't require the warp. The Imperium doesn't fracture. The Emperor doesn't end up on the Golden Throne, barely alive and unable to guide his empire. The Primarchs continue leading their legions, evolving as leaders rather than dying or disappearing. But here's the catch. The galaxy is still hostile. Orcs still swarm, Tyranids still come from beyond the galaxy, the Necrons still wake up, Dark Eldar still raid from Kamara, even with all Primarchs loyal, with the Emperor active, with Space Marine legions at full strength. Humanity faces existential threats. The difference? They face those threats united instead of crippled by civil war. In this scenario, humanity is winning. Yes, it is still a grim, dark universe with many, many foes appearing and millions dying, but they are all fighting side by side as brothers. Scenario 2, redemption, saving Horus after corruption. Now the harder question, what if the corruption already happened but the Emperor could still save them? When Horus finally confronted the Emperor aboard the Vengeful Spirit during the Siege of Terra, chaos had been in his soul for 7 years. He'd committed genocide, destroyed loyal worlds, killed billions. Sanguinius arrived first, desperate to reach his corrupted brother. The angelic Primarch fought Horus in the throne room, trying one last time to bring him back, but chaos had consumed too much of Horus. The fight was brutal. Sanguinius, already exhausted from the siege, wounded, his precognitive visions showing him this exact moment of his death. Sanguinius knew he was going to die, but he fought anyway. He fought because it was the right thing to do. Horus broke Sanguinius's back, held him by the throat, preparing to crush the life from his brother. That's when the Emperor arrived. He saw Horus about to kill Sanguinius and acted instantly. A psychic blast knocked Horus back, giving Sanguinius a moment to collapse, but still breathing. The Emperor stood between them now, facing his corrupted son. I know what you want to hear. You want me to say the Emperor waves his hand during the Siege of Terra, burns out the chaos corruption, and Horus is magically redeemed. Father and son reunite. The heresy ends. Everyone lives happily ever after. But that's not how chaos works, and by the Siege of Terra, it was already too late. Here's the brutal truth about chaos corruption. The Imperium has limited experience reversing it, and those cases are very specific. The Grey Knights and Inquisition perform exorcisms, rituals to expel possessing demons from victims. It works sometimes, though the success rate is terrible and most victims die anyway, but that's possession. Yeah, an external entity controlling someone. What Horus had was different and far worse. When Horus fell on Davin, wounded and delirious, Erebus showed him false visions. Horus made pacts with all 4 Chaos gods, Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, not possession. Pacts. Willing agreements that bound his soul to the ruinous powers. Then he spent 7 years empowered by chaos, his soul fundamentally reshaped through ritual, choice, and corruption that went deeper than any demon possession. By the time the Emperor confronted him aboard the Vengeful Spirit, there was nothing left to save. The Emperor himself recognized this. That's why he obliterated Horus's soul completely. It wasn't cruelty, it was necessity. The Horus he knew was already gone, replaced by a meat puppet channeling the power of 4 gods. The Emperor's mistake wasn't lacking the power to save Horus, it was the timing. He waited too long. If he'd intervened early, within weeks or months of Davin, when the corruption was fresh and Horus's original personality still dominated, maybe psychic intervention could have worked. Something like the exorcism rituals, but on a Primarch scale. Psychic surgery to cut out the chaos taint before it fully integrated into Horus's soul. But that required the Emperor to actually investigate when loyalist survivors reported Horus's betrayal. To treat it as urgent rather than impossible, to act immediately rather than waiting for Horus to reach Terra's doorstep. So here's scenario 2, rebuilt on more realistic foundations. The Emperor doesn't save Horus during the Siege of Terra because by then, it's impossible. He finds Horus corrupted, but only for weeks or months, not years. The pacts are fresh, the corruption hasn't fully consumed him. The Emperor performs something unprecedented. Psychic surgery on a Primarch's soul. It's agonizing, dangerous, and nearly kills both of them, but he manages it. Burns out the chaos taint before it fully takes root. Severs the pacts with the ruinous powers while enough of the original Horus remains to anchor his personality. Horus survives, but he's broken. He remembers ordering killings of his comrades, remembers planning to betray his father, remembers accepting chaos. The guilt is overwhelming. He wants to die, but the Emperor won't let him, both because he needs his generals to stop the other traitors, and because making Horus live with what he almost did is part of the redemption. In this version, Sanguinius never dies because the Siege of Terra plays out differently. With Horus recovered early, the heresy is disrupted. Maybe it still happens, but on a smaller scale. Maybe fewer Primarchs fall, maybe it ends sooner. The Black Rage and Red Thirst never manifest in the Blood Angels because Sanguinius doesn't die to trigger the genetic flaw. The Emperor sent Leman Russ to bring Magnus back to Terra for judgment, not to destroy Prospero, but Horus, already corrupted, intercepted and manipulated that order, twisting it into a massacre. Russ burned Prospero and slaughtered the 1,000 Sons, forcing Magnus to accept Tzeentch's offer to save his survivors. In this scenario where the Emperor saves Horus early, that manipulation never happens. The original order stands or doesn't happen at all. Magnus's legion isn't being slaughtered, so he has no desperate reason to accept Tzeentch's protection. Fulgrim might still be possessed by the Layer Demon, needs separate intervention, possibly savable if caught early, possibly already too far gone depending on timing, but it is very unlikely to save him. Mortarion, Angron, Perturabo, Kurz. Without Horus leading a rebellion, they have no War Master to follow. They're unhappy, bitter, maybe resentful, but they don't openly rebel. No heresy means no escalation into demon prince transformations. They stay problematic but loyal. Result, the Horus heresy becomes Lorgar's rebellion. Maybe just the word bearers, maybe a few others Lorgar already corrupted, but not half the legions. Magnus stays loyal, Horus is saved. Most other Primarchs never fall because they were following Horus, not serving chaos independently. The Imperium still has problems. Lorgar's rebellion, possibly Fulgrim's possession, definitely Angron's nails and deteriorating sanity, but it's not a galaxy-splitting civil war. It's a manageable crisis. The brutal truth, saving Horus early doesn't just save one Primarch, it prevents the cascade. Most traitor Primarchs fell because Horus fell first and gave them a leader to follow. Remove Horus from the equation by saving him, and the heresy collapses before it truly begins. So what does the 41st millennium look like if either scenario succeeds? In scenario 1, where the heresy never happens, the Imperium is almost unrecognizable. The Emperor is still active, not a corpse on a throne. The human webway is complete, meaning safe FTL travel without warp navigation. The Astronomicon still exists for those who need it, but it's not the only option. Technology doesn't stagnate because the Mechanicus isn't clinging to dogma after losing half their Forge worlds in Civil War. The Space Marine legions remain whole instead of being broken into chapters. Most Primarchs lead their sons, coordinating large-scale military responses to threats. When Hive Fleet Behemoth arrives in the 41st millennium, for example, the entire Ultramarines Legion responds, led by Guilliman himself, supported by other legions. The Tyranids still take massive casualties, but so does humanity. The difference, humanity can replace those losses better because the Imperium is functional. The Necrons wake up to find humanity much stronger. Tomb worlds get purged quickly before full reactivation. The Silent King's plans for galactic reconquest face coordinated Imperial opposition. Some tomb complexes still pose massive threats, but humanity isn't spread so thin fighting internal enemies. The Dark Elder raids continue because they existed long before humanity and will exist after, but webway access is controlled now. The Emperor understands webway mechanics, can monitor breaches, can counter Dark Elder portal technology. Raids happen, but less frequently, and with Imperial strike teams retaliating. Orcs are orcs. They fight anything nearby. With the Imperium stronger, Orc Wogs get crushed faster, but orcs never stop spawning, never stop fighting. The endless green tide continues because that's just how orcs work. The real threat is chaos. See, even without the heresy, chaos exists. The warp is still full of demons. Chaos cults still form. The difference is humanity isn't weakened. The Emperor can actively counter chaos influence. Planets that would fall to corruption get intervened on immediately. The Grey Knights still exist, probably created earlier to handle demon incursions. The Inquisition forms, but is more tame this time since the Emperor is still around to handle things. But here's the grim reality. Even in the best case scenario, life in the Imperium is still brutal. Guardsmen still die in millions defending planets from alien invasions. Hive worlds are still overcrowded industrial nightmares. The Mechanicus still doesn't care about worker safety. Servitors still exist. Lobotomized human slaves wired into machinery. The Imperium is still totalitarian. Still sacrifices millions for strategic goals. The only difference is it works better at protecting humanity. Citizens have slightly more hope that loyalty might actually keep them safe instead of just delaying death. The average guardsman's frontline life expectancy might climb from 15 hours to, let's be generous, 20 hours. Still terrible, just slightly less terrible. In scenario 2, where the Emperor saves Horus after corruption, things are a bit worse, but still better than in current canon timeline. Guilliman returned in the current timeline through Eldar resurrection magic, but in this timeline, multiple Primarchs never disappeared. Horus, Sanguinius, maybe Magnus, maybe Perturabo, they've been fighting for 10,000 years, but they're also dealing with trauma, guilt, and the weight of failed ideals. The Imperium is stronger militarily, but might be politically fragmented if the Emperor did not fix those fundamental issues with each Primarch. The Imperial faith becomes a problem. If the Emperor saved Horus, does that prove he's actually a god? Would the Ecclesiarchy still be around? Technology advances slightly because Mars wasn't as devastated. The Mechanicus is less dogmatic when they didn't lose as many STCs in Forge Worlds, but innovation is still heresy. The cult Mechanicus still treats machines as holy. Things improve marginally, but the fundamental problems persist. Both scenarios lead to the same conclusion. Humanity is still fighting for survival. The galaxy is still hostile. Trillions still die in wars. The Imperium is still built on suffering. The only real difference is hope. In scenario 1, where the heresy never happened, humanity has genuine hope for progress. The Emperor leads toward a better future. Primarchs work together, technology advances, citizens believe loyalty means something. In scenario 2, where Horus gets saved after corruption, hope is bitter. Everyone knows how close they came to losing. The redeemed Primarchs carry guilt for atrocities they committed. Trust is shattered. Citizens wonder if it could happen again. The Imperium survives but limps along, always looking over its shoulder. But compare either scenario to the actual 41st millennium. In current canon, the Emperor is a rotting corpse on the Golden Throne. Half the Primarchs are dead or missing. Half serve chaos. The Imperium is split in half by the Great Rift. Guilliman returned, but he's one Primarch trying to hold together a galaxy-spanning empire of nightmares, while the Lion is out there playing Monster Hunter rather than being a commander. I am joking about the Lion. Please don't burn me on the stake. The average citizen's life is endless work in a toxic factory, while commissars execute them for insufficient enthusiasm. So could the Emperor have saved Horus? Technically, yes. Both scenarios are theoretically possible. He had the power to prevent corruption through better parenting or to burn it out through psychic might, but he didn't. He failed as a father, refused to change his methods, and tried to fight corruption only when it was almost too late. That's the real tragedy of the Horus heresy. It was preventable. The Emperor could have done things differently and everything would have changed, but he didn't. In our timeline, the Emperor unfortunately was too human and made mistakes, and 10,000 years later, humanity drowns in the consequences. The Imperium became the Imperium not because it had to, but because the Emperor's hubris and the Primarch's pain created a perfect storm that chaos exploited. And now, in the 41st millennium, humanity doesn't get a do-over, the Emperor can't go back and be a better father, can't explain the Webway project to Horus, can't save Lorgar from humiliation or Angron from abandonment. Those moments are gone. The alternate timelines are fantasies. The Imperium got what it got. A broken empire, sustained by sacrifice, held together by faith in a corpse god who never wanted worship, defended by space marines descended from traitors and loyalists alike, grinding through millions of lives to buy one more day of survival. The question isn't what if the Emperor saved Horus. The question is why he didn't. And the answer reveals something worse than any chaos corruption. The Emperor, for all his power and planning, never truly understood the sons he created. He built demigods and treated them like weapons. He demanded loyalty, but never gave trust. He wanted an empire, but couldn't be bothered to actually lead his own family. That's the lesson of the Horus heresy. Power isn't enough. Intelligence isn't enough. Even immortality and psychic might aren't enough if you can't connect with the people who depend on you. The Emperor could have saved Horus. He could have saved them all, but he didn't. And the galaxy has been paying for that failure ever since. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war, but it didn't have to be that way. It became that way because the brightest hope humanity ever produced couldn't bring himself to treat his sons like sons instead of soldiers. The Emperor could have saved Horus. He just chose not to until it was too late.